Welcome to Face the State. I'm Ariana Bennett. Thank you for being with us. Medical marijuana use has been legal in Nevada since 2001, and businesses were finally legally allowed to sell it starting last year. But getting those businesses up and running is a long, detailed process with a lot of red tape and some opposition from locals. Laura Freed with the Nevada Division of Public and Behavioral Health is here to talk about that with us. Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so this has definitely been a long process with a ton of applicants to open medical marijuana businesses. I think more than 500 businesses applied.
Right.
What is the process like narrowing that down?
Well, yes, over 500 folks applied to be a registered marijuana establishment in Nevada. And you can apply to be a dispensary, cultivator, independent testing laboratory, or a production facility, or some combination thereof, although labs have to be independent of all the other types of facilities. The scoring process is very detailed. You have to submit a very long series of documents explaining your plans for care of the product and safekeeping, security of your facility, your inventory control plans. You have to submit land use approval, at least preliminary approval from the local jurisdiction, and so all that is evaluated by the staff, and then they're ranked, and so that's how we came up with the numbers in the 2014 application period, which, as you know, happened late last summer, and the certificates were issued provisionally in last November.
So how many made it through the process of that 500 and some change?
Well, right now there are 55 provisionally registered dispensaries. There are about 17 laboratories, 16 or 17 provisionally registered laboratories. Now, these are not folks that necessarily will open. Mm-hmm. We'll see about that. But and there are well over 100 cultivators and production facilities.
Right. And after all of that long process, so far, very few have actually managed to open.
Right. It is a long process. Sometimes facilities will want to do tenant improvements to the property that they've rented or purchased. They have to get business licenses from the locals. They have to have zoning and land use approval. They have to set up all their systems so that state inspectors and auditors can come out. And they have to have fire inspection, building official inspection, all the stuff that a regular business would have to go through, plus all this other stuff that goes along with selling marijuana medically.
Right, and so that explains why here in Northern Nevada we don't have a single dispensary has managed to open. Several have tried, and they're in the process, but
they're working on it. There's one dispensary in Sparks that has its permanent registration certificate, but I don't know how close to opening they are.
Right.
So, and of course, we have very few cultivators currently working to grow the product. So, and the growth cycle of marijuana is anywhere from 12 to 17 weeks, depending on what kind of cultivation techniques you're using. So before the production kitchens and the dispensaries can open up, we have to have some cultivators going, raising crops unless they obtain product from a pre-existing registered patient for medical marijuana with the state of Nevada. Right. But that would take product from a lot of different patients.
So do the dispensaries have to sell product that's grown here locally?
They don't necessarily, as long as it goes to a testing lab. Every batch or lot of marijuana has to go to an independent testing laboratory.
Here in Nevada or anywhere?
Yes, here in Nevada.
Okay.
Yes. So to get off the ground, a dispensary might obtain product from someplace else, although we would prefer not. But as long as it passes a lab test, it would be okay to sell.
Okay, now on top of all of the regulatory hurdles that these businesses have to jump, they're getting a little bit of opposition from residents. There have been a few different ones that have tried to open in places where some residents weren't comfortable with it.
Right.
One that's been a little bit embattled has been off of Melrose Highway, not far from Galena High School.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, there is a dispensary that at the corner of Melrose Highway and Thomas Creek that has a provisional registration certificate that that registrant owns the land, and they've gotten the land use approvals from Washoe County. So they're in the clear to develop that land and build that facility. And I know they've encountered resistance from the neighbors. And the only thing I can say about that is that the state law requires that a medical marijuana facility be 1,000 feet from any public or private school, K-12 school, and 300 feet from a community facility. And a community facility is a church, a synagogue, a daycare, a public swimming pool, something like that. And every applicant has to submit a survey to us that proves that they met those statutory distance requirements. If the local jurisdiction wants to add stricter requirements than that 1,000 feet or that 300 feet, they're certainly welcome to do that. And of course, the establishment would have to comport with that, not just statute, but that's the minimum as set in state statute, and that dispensary does comport with statute.
Yeah, now the complaints these parents are having, they're concerned that because of its proximity to school, obviously it's within the law, but they think it's too close, that high school students are going to be able to walk over and, they're going to be exposed to something that the parents don't want their kids exposed to. What's the response to that?
That's not correct. No one gets into a medical marijuana facility who is not a registered patient with a patient card, or what we call a medical marijuana establishment agent. So that's anybody who works in, volunteers for, is on the board of directors of a medical marijuana establishment. They get to be an MME agent, but those are the only people, and of course state staff or local staff doing inspection and enforcement activities, but those are the only people who enter dispensaries. And of course the public can't go into a laboratory or a cultivator or a production kitchen. That is not for patients, that's just for the workers in that establishment.
So in terms of parents being concerned about their kids being able to get marijuana from these establishments, it's kind of akin to a pharmacy, for example?
Yes, and yes, you couldn't just walk back into the area of your local drugstore and pick stuff off the shelves. It's the same kind of thing.
That's or at least behind the counter at the pharmacy.
Right, yes, you could not walk behind the counter at the pharmacy and take anything. So you would not be allowed to do that.
Okay, do you have any message for parents who still say, I don't want this in my neighborhood?
I think the state has tried to stay very much out of local zoning and land use decisions. So we think of ourselves as the folks who qualify the establishments to be in the business, and they have to prove to us that they're okay at the local level before they will get their registration certificate. So we're trying very hard to stay in our lane on that front.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about security overall. I think there are so many regulations for the product itself. They have to go through extensive testing. How do you ensure that products are uniform in terms of their strength, that sort of thing?
Well, marijuana can be grown in lots of different potencies. The marijuana that's grown for medical use can be very, very strong. And one of the things that is in regulation is that you have to be able to have the lab tell you, if you're a cultivator, for instance, the lab has to tell you what the percentage of THC and other cannabinoids is in your marijuana. So you could have a strain that's relatively weak, or you could have a strain that has a great deal of THC or a great deal of some other cannabinoid, and the lab has to be able to tell you all that. And then each package, whether it's produced into something like an edible product or it just stays as the flower, it has to be packaged with the percentage of THC and other cannabinoids, as well as terpenes. That's another required test by the lab. So you could have various kinds of potencies, but that should be all readily available to the consumer at the dispensary point.
Okay, now this whole thing is, obviously relatively new to Nevada. With any new system, you're going to have kinks you have to work out.
Yes.
Are there any problems that you guys are anticipating having to deal with once this all really gets up off the ground?
Well, right now we're just our problems are getting it off the ground. I mean, it's perhaps premature for me to think about problems when dispensaries open, because right now I have We have lots of developmental problems. For instance, pesticides is a big issue among the industry because the legislature just passed a law to permit a certain type of pesticide to be used that is a certain crop group designated by the EPA. And so there's a great deal of consternation right now in the industry about what the Division of Public and Behavioral Health is going to require folks to test for in the way of unapproved pesticides, and then what Department of Agriculture is going to permit cultivators to use in growing marijuana. So I mean, right now we're sort of trying to react to what the legislature has done recently and adjust our policies and procedures to account for that. And I am sure there will be new things that none of us anticipated when dispensaries open. But and we do have dispensaries that are really pushing to open. There's one in Las Vegas that is very close, but is having some business licensure problems. So I hope soon there will be one open, because I know there's a great deal of desire among the patients to have some place to go.
Yeah, I mean, we're running out of time here. I have about a minute left, but I did notice that the number of people who have gotten approved for these medical marijuana cards has gone up significantly. We've got twice as many in Washoe County than we did this time last year.
Right. We're now over 10,000 registered card holders in the state. You're right, the vast majority of them are in Clark County, but there's been a significant growth in card holders in Washoe County, and I expect that to increase as I expect the demand to self-stimulate.
Yeah. Okay, Laura Freed, thank you so much for your
You're
time.
welcome.
I really appreciate it. Coming up on Face the State, we will continue our discussion of medical marijuana, this time from the business perspective. Hear from a local business owner on why he chose to sell pot right after the break.